Your bastard dies with you!
Is she still breathing? Get out. And take your mistake with you. Please, Miss Hana, it's freezing outside. I said out. The heavy oak doors of the park mansion swung open, letting in a gust of icy Seoul wind. Nia stumbled, her hands instantly flying to cradle her swollen stomach. Rain lashed against her face, soaking her thin beige uniform in seconds. Before she could find her footing, a sharp pair of heels clicked against the marble behind her. A hand slammed into Nia's shoulder, a shove fueled by months of fermented jealousy. Nia didn't scream. She gasped, her feet slipping on the rain-slicked stone steps as she plummeted toward the dark, unforgiving pavement. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the impact that would end everything. But instead of cold concrete, she hit something solid, warm, and immovable. The scent of rain-soaked cedar and expensive leather filled her lungs. Nia opened her eyes to see a pair of dark, intense eyes looking down at her. Kang-Dae, the man whose name was whispered in fear across every boardroom in the city, held her firmly against his black leather jacket. His grip was protective, his expression a mask of terrifying stillness. Slowly, his gaze shifted upward, past Nia's wet, clinging hair, to the doorway. There stood Hana, her face pale and her hand still outstretched from the push. The triumphant scowl she had worn a second ago shattered. Her breath hitched, the cold air turning to visible mist in her lungs. She stared at the man she had spent years trying to impress, only to realize he was now holding the trash she had just tried to throw away. Kang-Dae didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Something shifted behind his eyes, something quiet, unreadable, and very, very dangerous. In that single moment, the power in the park mansion died, and Nia's new life began. If you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button right now because this story is going to keep you glued from beginning to end. The rain did not stop, but for Nia, the world had suddenly gone quiet. The only sound was the heavy thud of Kang-Dae's heart against her ear. He did not let her go. He held her like she was the most precious thing in Seoul, his black leather jacket shielding her from the stinging wind. Nia looked up, her breath coming in shaky gasps. The water rolled off his sharp jawline, but his eyes never moved from the doorway. There stood Hana. The woman who had just pushed a pregnant girl into the dark was now frozen. Her expensive black dress looked dull in the shadows of the porch. Her mouth hung open, but no words came out. She looked at Kang-Dae, the man every rich family in the city tried to please, and she began to shake. The power she had used to bully Nia for months had vanished in a single second. Is this how the Park family treats their guests? Kang-Dae's voice was low, like a growl of a dragon waking up. It wasn't loud, but it made the air feel heavy. Hana took a small, stumbling step back. She is just a maid, Mr. Kang-Dae. She was leaving. I was just helping her. You were throwing her away, he cut her off. His grip on Nia tightened slightly, a silent promise of safety. He stepped forward, moving into the warm light of the mansion's entrance. He didn't look like a guest anymore. He looked like an owner. Look at her, Hana. Look at what you did. Nia shivered, her wet uniform clinging to her skin. She felt small, but for the first time, she didn't feel invisible. Kang-Dae turned his back on the mansion, acting as if the wealthy Park family no longer existed. He began to walk toward his sleek, black car waiting in the driveway. Wait! Hana called out, her voice high and desperate. Where are you taking her? My mother hasn't finished the paperwork for her leave. Kang-Dae stopped. He didn't turn around. The rain splashed against the pavement around them, but he stood tall and still. She is never stepping foot inside this house again, he stated. Each word was clear and final. Anything she owns stays here. From this moment on, she has everything she needs. He reached the car, and his driver quickly opened the back door. Kang-Dae leaned down, carefully placing Nia onto the soft leather seat. He climbed in beside her, and the door shut with a solid, heavy thud that blocked out the storm. Inside, it was warm and smelled of expensive wood. Nia huddled into the corner, still holding her stomach, her eyes wide with shock. Kang-Dae looked at her, his intense gaze softening just a tiny bit. He pulled a thick, warm blanket from the seat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You are safe now," he said. He didn't ask if she wanted to go, he simply told the driver to move. As the car pulled away, Nia looked out the window. She saw Hana standing alone in the rain, looking smaller than she ever had. Nia leaned back into the seat, the heat of the car finally reaching her skin, knowing her life as a maid was over forever. Nia woke up to a room so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. For a moment, she thought she was still in her tiny, cold room at the Park mansion. She waited for the loud bang on her door and Hana's voice telling her to start the floor scrubbing. But the smell was different. Instead of cleaning bleach and old dust, the air smelled like fresh lavender and expensive soap. She opened her eyes and gasped. The ceiling was high, and the walls were made of glass. Outside, the lights of Seoul twinkled like fallen stars. She was lying on a bed so soft it felt like a cloud. The sheets were made of smooth silk, a material she had only ever touched while folding laundry for the rich. She looked down at her hands. They were clean, and she was wearing a soft, oversized cotton shirt that felt warm against her skin. Slowly, Nia sat up and placed a hand on her stomach. The baby kicked gently, as if to say they were both okay. She looked around the room. There were no mops, no buckets, and no shadows of people waiting to yell at her. This was a sanctuary. It was a world of luxury she had only seen through the crack of a doorway while holding a silver tray. Now, she was the one inside the room. A light knock at the door made her jump. The heavy wooden door creaked open, and Kang-Dae stepped inside. He had changed out of his wet leather jacket and was wearing a simple black sweater. Without the rain and the dark street, he looked less like a monster and more like a man. He was carrying a small tray with a bowl of steaming soup and a glass of milk. He stopped at the edge of the bed. His face was still calm and serious, but his eyes didn't look as cold as they did before. He set the tray down on the side table. "You slept for a long time," he said. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "The doctor said you were exhausted. You need to eat." Nia looked at the soup and then back at him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Her voice was small and shaky. "I am just a maid." You are the man everyone is afraid of." Kang-Dae stood still for a moment. He looked out the window at the city below. Then, he did something Nia never expected. He sat on the edge of the chair near her bed. He didn't look down at her, he looked at her with a strange, soft expression. "People fear what they do not understand," he said. "And they hate what they cannot control. The Park family could not control you, Nia. That is why they tried to break you." He reached out, his hand stopping just before it touched hers. It was as if he was afraid he might scare her. "You are not a maid here," he added. "You are my guest. And that baby, he deserves a better start than a rainy street." For a second, the hard mask he wore every day cracked. Nia saw a flash of loneliness in his eyes that matched her own. He wasn't just a powerful billionaire, he was a person who had seen enough cruelty to know it had to stop. He pushed the tray a little closer to her. "Eat," he said gently. "I will be in the next room if you need anything." The next morning, the air in Kang-Dae's office was as cold as a block of ice. He sat behind a large desk made of dark stone, his face as still as a statue. Outside the glass walls, the city of Seoul was busy and loud, but inside, the silence felt like a heavy weight. The silence was broken when the heavy double doors flew open. Mrs. Park, the mother-in-law and head of the mansion Nia had fled, marched into the room. She was draped in expensive furs and diamonds, but her face was twisted into a mask of anger. She did not wait for an invite to sit. She slammed her designer handbag onto the stone desk. Kang-Dae, she snapped, her voice high and sharp. You have crossed a line. You took my property last night. That girl belongs to my house. She has a contract, and she has work to finish. Kang-Dae did not blink. He did not move a single muscle. He simply leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes locking onto hers. The most feared persona that the city talked about began to fill the room. He didn't need to yell, his presence alone made the light seem to dim. Property? He asked. His voice was so low it was almost a whisper, yet it echoed against the walls. You are talking about a human being, Mrs. Park. A woman your daughter tried to kill in the mud. Mrs. Park waved her hand as if the rain and the shove were nothing important. Hana was just being firm. The girl is a maid. She is replaceable. But the scandal of her staying here with you? That is not replaceable. Think of your reputation. People will talk. They will say you have gone soft for a servant. A slow, chilling smile touched Kang-Dae's lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. He stood up slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow over the desk. He walked around to the front, stepping into Mrs. Park's personal space. She flinched, her brave face starting to crumble. My reputation is built on power, he said, his gaze as sharp as a blade. And right now, my power is protecting Nia. If you or your daughter ever mention her name again, I will look into your family's bank accounts. I will look at your taxes. I will make sure the name Park is erased from this city by sunset. The mother-in-law turned pale. She realized she wasn't talking to a business partner anymore. She was talking to a man who could destroy her entire world with one phone call. Her hand shook as she grabbed her bag. You would ruin us for a maid, she whispered, her voice trembling. I would ruin anyone who touches what is mine, Kang-Dae replied. He turned his back to her, looking out at the skyline. Now, leave. And tell Hana that if she ever comes near Nia again, the rain will be the least of her problems. Mrs. Park didn't say another word. She turned and hurried out of the office, the sound of her heels clicking fast against the floor. Once she was gone, Kang-Dae closed his eyes for a moment. The coldness stayed on his face, but his hand reached for his phone. He dialed a number. Check on Nia, he ordered. Make sure she has everything she wants. And get her a lawyer. We are making sure she is never property again. The afternoon sun peeked through the glass walls of the penthouse, making the gold decorations glow. Nia felt much better after a hot meal and a long nap. She began to walk around the large living room, her hand resting on her stomach. Everything in the house was perfect, but one thing caught her eye. On a small marble table sat a wooden box. It looked old and worn, which was strange in a room full of shiny new things. Nia walked closer. The lid was slightly open. Inside, she saw a silver locket on a thin chain. Her heart skipped a beat. She reached out with trembling fingers and picked it up. She knew this locket. It had a small scratch on the back in the shape of a star. It was the same one her grandmother had lost years ago in a busy market back home. I found it in a small shop many years ago, a deep voice said from behind her. Nia turned quickly. Kang-Dae was standing in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his scary business suit. Instead, he looked tired, as if he had been carrying a heavy secret for a long time. He walked toward her and looked at the silver jewelry in her hand. How do you have this? Nia whispered. This belonged to my family. My grandmother always said it was stolen by a traveler she had helped when he was sick. Kang-Dae sat down on the sofa and looked at his hands. I was that traveler's son, he admitted. His voice was soft and full of regret. My father was a young man then. He was lost and had no money. Your family took him in. They fed him and gave him a place to sleep when he had nothing. But he was desperate. When he left, he took that locket to sell so he could buy a ticket to Seoul. Nia stared at him in shock. The man everyone feared was linked to her through a story of kindness and a hidden debt. He never forgot what he did, Kang-Dae continued. On his deathbed, he told me to find the family and pay them back. He said the locket was a reminder of the man he didn't want to be. I spent years searching for your name. When I finally found you working in the Park mansion, I couldn't believe it. I watched you from far away because I didn't know how to tell you the truth. I saw how hard you worked. I saw how they treated you. Nia looked down at the locket. The metal felt warm in her palm. All this time, she thought she was just a lucky maid who had been rescued by a stranger. But Kang-Dae hadn't just appeared by accident. He had been looking for a way to say sorry for his father's mistake. I didn't catch you in the rain just because it was the right thing to do, Kang-Dae said, looking directly into her eyes. I caught you because I owe my life and my success to the kindness your family showed mine. You are not a stranger to me, Nia. You are the reason I am here. Nia felt a tear roll down her cheek. The anger she felt for the Parks began to fade, replaced by a strange sense of peace. She wasn't alone in a foreign city anymore. She had a history here, and she had someone who truly cared about her future. She snapped the locket shut and smiled at him. For the first time, the penthouse didn't feel like a golden cage. It felt like home. While Nia felt safe in the high-rise penthouse, a dark storm was still brewing inside the Park mansion. Hana could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the image of Kang-Dae holding the maid in the rain. It made her blood boil with a hot, bitter jealousy. To Hana, Nia was just a servant who should have stayed in the mud. The idea that Nia was now living in luxury, protected by the most powerful man in Seoul, felt like a slap in the face. Hana paced back and forth in her large bedroom, kicking at the expensive rugs. She knew she could not fight Kang-Dae with force. He was too strong, and he had already threatened to ruin her family. But she believed everyone had a secret. She was sure that a girl like Nia, who had come from so far away, must be hiding something shameful. If she could find a scandal, she could show Kang-Dae that his treasure was actually trash. I will not let a maid take what belongs to me, Hana whispered to the empty room. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, and her voice sounded sharp. The next morning, Hana met a man in a quiet, dark corner of a coffee shop. He was a private investigator, someone who was paid to find the secrets that people wanted to keep buried. He wore a plain hat and did not look at her directly. Hana slid a thick envelope full of cash across the table. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the excitement of her plan. I want everything, Hana hissed, leaning over the table. Find out where she came from. Find out who the father of that baby is. Find out if she ever broke the law or lied on her papers. I need something that will make Kang-Dae throw her out onto the street where she belongs. The man nodded slowly and tucked the money away. It will take time to look into records from another country, he said. But everyone has a shadow. I will find hers. Over the next few days, Hana became obsessed. She stopped going out with her rich friends. She spent all her time waiting for a phone call. She stared at photos of Nia on her phone, her face twisting with hate. She imagined the moment she would walk into Kang-Dae's office and drop a file of lies and secrets on his desk. She could almost see the look of disgust on his face when he realized he had been protecting a criminal. Her mother, the matriarch, watched her daughter from the doorway. She saw the way Hana's beauty was fading behind her anger. But she did not stop her. In her heart, she also wanted Nia gone. She wanted the shame of the Maid scandal to go away so her family could be perfect again. Hana did not care about the cost or the risk. She was falling into a deep hole of her own making, driven by a jealousy that blinded her to the truth. She was ready to burn everything down just to see Nia cry one more time. She waited by the phone, a cruel smile on her lips, ready to strike the moment she found the shadow she was looking for. The white walls of the doctor's office were bright, and the air smelled like clean soap. Nia sat on the edge of the tall exam table, swinging her feet nervously. Back at the Park mansion, she had always gone to her checkups alone, slipping out early in the morning before anyone noticed she was gone. She was used to being the girl in the waiting room with no one to hold her hand. But today, the heavy door opened, and Kang-Dae walked in. He looked out of place in the small, quiet room, his large frame making the space feel tiny, but he did not leave. "You do not have to be here," Nia said softly, tugging at the edge of her light beige gown. "I know you are a busy man. You have meetings and big decisions to make." Kang-Dae pulled a chair close to the table and sat down. He did not look at his watch or his phone. "There is no meeting more important than this," he replied. His voice was steady and calm, acting like an anchor for her fluttering heart. A kind doctor entered the room and smiled at them both. She put some cool gel on Nia's stomach and moved a small plastic tool across her skin. On a small black screen, blurry shapes began to move. Nia held her breath, her eyes fixed on the flickering gray light. Then, a sound filled the room. Thump thump. Thump thump. Thump thump. It was fast and strong, like a tiny drum beating a rhythm of life. Nia felt tears prick her eyes. It was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. She looked over at Kang-Dae, wondering if he would find it boring or technical. Instead, she saw him leaning forward, his eyes wide and his jaw dropping just a little bit. The most feared man in Seoul looked completely stunned. "Is that?" Kang-Dae started, his voice cracking for the first time. "That is the heartbeat," the doctor said with a nod. "The baby is growing very well. He is a fighter, just like his mother." Kang-Dae reached out, and this time he did not hesitate. He took Nia's hand in his. His palm was large and warm, covering her fingers completely. As the sound of the heartbeat filled the air, something shifted in the room. It was no longer just about a debt from the past or a rescue in the rain. In that moment, the bond between them became unbreakable. They weren't just a billionaire and a maid anymore, they were two people connected by a tiny, beating heart. Kang-Dae did not look away from the screen until the doctor turned the machine off. When they walked out of the clinic together, he kept his arm protectively behind her back. The sun was shining on the Seoul streets, but Nia didn't feel the need to hide in the shadows anymore. She looked up at him and saw a new look in his eyes, a look of fierce, fatherly pride. "We will protect him," Kang-Dae said as they reached the car. "Both of you. No matter what Hana or anyone else tries to do, they will have to go through me first." Nia smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She was part of something real. The phone rang while Kang-Dae was away at an emergency board meeting. Nia picked it up, expecting his deep, comforting voice. Instead, she heard a woman who sounded out of breath and terrified. The woman claimed to be a former maid from the Park mansion, someone Nia had once shared bread with in the cold kitchen. "Nia, please," the voice whispered. "Hana found the locket's history. She's going to destroy the shop where Kang-Dae found it. You have to meet me in Myeongdong. I have the papers that can stop her." Nia's heart raced. She knew how much that locket meant to Kang-Dae. She didn't want him to lose the only link to his father's past because of her. Without thinking twice, she grabbed her coat and slipped out of the penthouse. She didn't want to bother Kang-Dae's guards, so she took a taxi to the busy shopping district. Myeongdong was a sea of bright neon lights and thousands of people. The smell of street food filled the air, and the noise was deafening. Nia pushed through the crowd, looking for the small alleyway the woman had described. But as she turned a corner away from the main street, the lights grew dim. The crowd thinned out, and the air turned cold. Suddenly, a black car sped around the corner, its tires screeching against the pavement. Nia froze. From the shadows of a doorway, Hana stepped out. She wasn't wearing her usual silk dress, she wore a dark coat and a cruel, triumphant smile. "You are so easy to trick, Nia," Hana mocked. "Did you really think a maid would have papers to stop me?" Nia backed away, her hand over her stomach. "Where is the woman from the phone?" "She doesn't exist," Hana snapped. She signaled to the car, and two men stepped out. "Kang-Dae thinks he can hide you in a glass tower, but out here, you are nothing." Nia turned and ran. She wasn't fast, and her breath came in short, painful bursts, but the fear for her baby gave her strength. She ducked into a narrow path between two tall buildings. Behind her, she could hear the heavy footsteps of the men chasing her. She knocked over a stack of wooden crates to slow them down, the sound echoing like gunshots in the quiet alley. She reached the main street again, her eyes searching for help. She saw a black SUV weaving through traffic, ignoring the red lights. The car didn't slow down, it slid sideways, blocking the path of the men behind her. The door flew open, and Kang-Dae jumped out before the car had even fully stopped. His face was a mask of pure, cold fury. He didn't look at the men, he looked only at Nia, who was trembling against a brick wall. He reached her in 3 long strides, pulling her into his arms. "I told you to never leave without me," he whispered, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and relief. He looked over her shoulder at Hana, who was trying to hide in the shadows. Kang-Dae's eyes turned into ice. The chase was over, but the war had just reached a whole new level. He didn't say a word to Hana, he simply lifted Nia into the car, his silence more terrifying than any scream. The ride back to the penthouse was silent, but the air inside the car felt like it was buzzing with electricity. Kang-Dae kept one arm around Nia, his hand resting firmly on her shoulder as if he was making sure she was really there. Nia leaned into him, her heart still racing from the narrow escape in Myeongdong. She looked at his face and saw a look of cold, sharp focus. He wasn't just angry, he was ready for war. As soon as they stepped inside the glass walls of his home, Kang-Dae didn't go to bed. He went straight to his office and opened his laptop. The blue light of the screen reflected in his dark eyes, making him look more like the most feared man than ever before. He didn't pick up a weapon, but the phone calls he began to make were just as powerful. "Start with their shipping contracts," Kang-Dae said into the phone, his voice as calm as a winter morning. "Cancel every deal they have with our partners. By tomorrow morning, I want their warehouses to be empty and their trucks to be still." Nia stood in the doorway, wrapped in a warm blanket. She watched him work. He moved with the precision of a hunter. He knew exactly where the Park family kept their money and who their biggest supporters were. One by one, he began to pull the threads that held their wealthy life together. He called bank directors and told them to freeze the Park family's credit. He contacted the city's top lawyers and told them to start looking into every small mistake the Park company had ever made. By midnight, the news began to break on the television. The Park family's stock prices were falling like stones in a lake. Their biggest investors were running away, scared of being caught in Kang-Dae's path. In their large, cold mansion, the mother-in-law and Hana were likely watching their world fall apart, realizing too late that the maid they had pushed into the rain was the one thing they should have never touched. Kang-Dae finally looked up from his desk. He saw Nia watching him and his expression softened. He stood up and walked over to her, taking her hands in his. "I told them I would ruin anyone who touched what is mine," he said softly. "They thought I was joking. They thought their name would protect them from their cruelty." Nia looked at the glowing city lights behind him. "Is it over?" she asked. "It is only the beginning," Kang-Dae replied. "By the end of the week, they will have nothing. No house, no cars, and no power. They will learn what it feels like to be invisible, just like they made you feel." He led her away from the office, leaving the glowing screens behind. For the first time, Nia realized that Kang-Dae wasn't just protecting her with his body, he was changing the world around her so that she would never have to be afraid again. The dragon had woken up, and he was burning down everything that had ever caused her pain. The grand ballroom of the Seoul Hotel was filled with the sound of violins and the clinking of crystal glasses. Everyone who was important in the city was there, dressed in their finest clothes. In the corner, Hana and the mother-in-law stood together, their faces pale. They were trying to act like their family business wasn't falling apart, but the guests were already whispering and pointing. The park name was becoming a joke, and they were desperate to find a way back into the light. Suddenly, the large gold doors at the entrance swung open. The room went silent. Every head turned to see who had arrived. Nia stepped into the light, and for a moment, nobody recognized her. She was no longer wearing a beige maid's uniform or holding a cleaning cloth. She wore a stunning, flowing gown the color of a midnight sky, dotted with tiny diamonds that looked like stars. Her long black hair was styled perfectly, and she walked with her head held high. She wasn't just a guest, she looked like a queen. Beside her, Kang-Dae stood tall in a sharp black suit, his hand resting protectively on her lower back. Hana's face twisted with a mix of shock and pure rage. She dropped her glass, the red wine splashing onto her shoes like a stain. How dare she? Hana hissed, loud enough for those nearby to hear. She's just a servant. She doesn't belong in a place like this. Kang-Dae did not stop. He led Nia directly to the center of the room, stopping right in front of the Park family. The crowd gathered around, sensing that something big was about to happen. "You are wrong, Hana," Kang-Dae said. His voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the ballroom. Nia belongs wherever she chooses to stand. You, however, are the one who does not belong here. He turned to the crowd and raised his hand. A large screen behind the stage flickered to life. It showed the security footage from the night of the storm. The guests gasped as they watched Hana physically shove a pregnant Nia into the freezing rain. Then, the video showed the mother-in-law standing by the window, watching it happen and doing nothing to stop it. The silent permission the mother-in-law had given was now visible to the entire world. The room filled with gasps of disgust. The wealthy guests, who valued reputation above all else, began to step away from the Parks as if they were a disease. "This is the truth of the Park family," Kang-Dae announced. "They treat people like trash when they think no one is looking. But I was looking." The mother-in-law tried to speak, her hands shaking as she reached for her daughter, but there were no words left to save them. Their power was gone. Their friends were gone. They were exposed. Nia looked at Hana, who was now crying in front of everyone. For a second, Nia felt a tiny bit of pity, but then she remembered the cold rain and the fear for her baby. She turned away, choosing to look at Kang-Dae instead. She realized she didn't need their apology to be whole. She was standing in the light, and she was finally free. The celebration at the hotel continued behind them, but the noise of the music and the gossiping guests felt like they were 1,000 miles away. Nia stepped out onto the wide balcony, the cool night air refreshing her face. Below them, the Han River flowed like a dark ribbon through the heart of Seoul, reflecting the millions of glowing lights from the skyscrapers. It had started to rain again, but this time, it was a soft, gentle mist that made the city look like a painting. Nia leaned against the stone railing, her fingers brushing the fabric of her dark blue gown. She looked down at the water, thinking about how far she had come. Just a few weeks ago, she was a shadow in a big house, a girl whose name was only spoken when there was a mess to clean. She had felt like a ghost, floating through a world that didn't want to see her. A warm weight settled around her shoulders. Kang-Dae had followed her out, and he was now draping his jacket over her to keep her warm. He stood beside her, his hands resting on the railing. He didn't look at the city, he only looked at her. The most feared man was gone, replaced by the man who had sat on her bed and brought her soup. "The Parks will never bother you again," he said quietly. The wind carried his words toward the river. "They are leaving the city tonight. They lost their company, their house, and the respect of everyone they knew. They will have to learn how to live without looking down on others." Nia turned to face him, her eyes bright with tears. I never wanted to destroy them, she whispered. I just wanted to be safe. I just wanted my baby to have a chance. Kang-Dae reached out and gently tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear. His touch was so light it was almost like the rain. You did more than survive, Nia. You showed them that kindness is stronger than cruelty. You changed me, too. I spent so many years building walls and making people afraid of me. I thought that was the only way to be powerful. He looked down at her stomach, where the baby kicked again. A small, real smile finally broke across his face. He knelt down so he was at eye level with her child. I have a promise to make, he said, his voice deep and full of emotion. In this city, people like to pretend that some people don't matter. They try to make the hardworking and the kind feel invisible. But as long as I am breathing, that will never happen to you. Or your mother. He stood up and took Nia's hand, lacing his fingers with hers. You are the light in my house now, he added. From this day on, everyone in Seoul will know exactly who you are. You are Nia, the woman who fought for her child and won. And you will never have to walk through the rain alone again. Nia leaned her head against his shoulder, watching the rain fall over the Han River. The fear was gone. The shadows were gone. She was finally seen, finally loved, and finally home. Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.